What happens if your first gig in Nashville is a total disaster? That's exactly what happened to my next guest, bassist Logan Hatcher. And if that wasn't enough, he lost his job, his wife, his house blew over. Really, there's a tornado that ripped through here in 2020. And all that is a great setup for a country song, but it's probably pretty terrible to live through. My last guest, Tyson Leslie, suggested I reach out to Logan Hatcher to get some perspective on my own rough patches, knowing that Logan himself had been through some similar challenges on Broadway. In the final video of this series, I sit down with Logan to talk about his bumpy start here in Nashville, how he turned things around to become one of the most in-demand bassists in town, how he steers clear of personal politics, and his advice for new musicians looking to make it here in Music City. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Logan Hatcher. Here with Logan Hatcher, bassist extraordinaire. You are all over Broadway, all over Nashville. Anybody who's anybody knows you. So give me a brief story about how you came to Nashville. When did you come here?
Came here in 2018 by accident. I've been playing for 21 years at this point. I was just getting out of the military, and the best job offer I happened to get was a distribution manager here. Knew nothing about the music scene at all. After COVID, lost my job. Tornado took my house out, so I was like, I might as well just try and play for a living.
Oh, okay, that sounds like a country story.
It worked out.
Okay, so when was that tornado?
2020.
Is after that when you decided, I want to play full-time?
It wasn't even really a conscious decision. It was more kind of like, well, I'm broke, divorced, and homeless now. I'm kind of at the bottom, so I might as well just go for it. Even then, I wasn't trying to make it like a full-time thing. Then after, I just started getting busier and busier. And then I had my job call me back 8 months later and say, oh, we're reopening. We want to have you back. I'm like, I'm having too much fun. I'm making twice as much as you guys are paying me, so there's no point in coming back.
So when did you start playing on Broadway in Nashville? Was that tornado when you said, I need to start doing this, or had you already been playing?
I already dipped my toes in it a little bit. I had anybody who's been in Nashville probably 5 or 6 years knows my first gig ever was an absolute train wreck.
Okay.
Said yes to a gig. It was a Tuesday in December, 2 to 6, pouring down rain. They forgot their bass player was out of town, like, we need somebody, and I was like, should not have done it.
So why shouldn't you have done it? Let's talk about that.
I had no idea what I was getting into. I didn't even know what Broadway was.
Okay.
Didn't know any of the songs. And that was kind of my come to Jesus, oh, this is what this is. And then fast forward a few years, I would always meet guys who were brand new to town. They're like, what do I need to learn? How many songs do I need to know? My answer is like, yes, you need to know a lot.
I always say the quick, easy answer is that you need to know every song that ever was recorded, every song that's out now, and every song that will be out. And that's a good starting point for...
I met this guitar player. He was like, man, do I really need to know like 300 or 400 songs to get through a gig on Broadway? I'm like, no, you need to know thousands and plus.
Yeah, I mean, you can be with one group and just play the same songs over and over again. And that's also a great way to get really familiar with some material, and that's one way to do it. But Broadway is very much a revolving door of musicians.
Very much so.
And so that first gig, what was going through your brain on that first gig when you were on stage? What was it like?
Just kind of like 4 hours of anxiety for sure. I would have sent my ass home if I was the band leader on that gig, but didn't, probably just because it was this time of year, absolutely nobody in there, pouring down rain. They were probably just like, whatever, let's just get through this. But then I've been in that situation since then where like I had a kid on a gig who clearly didn't know what he was doing. Just graduated Berkeley, so he's like, oh yeah, I'm a Berkeley kid. It's like, you know music theory and you can...
Yeah.
That was my thing, is like growing up I was a jazz standards guy. I could, play a Dream Theater tunes and Rush songs, whatever, but like Clint Black, who is that? And like nonverbal communication was not a thing. You had to set music in front of my face and I could read it. But it wasn't until I got here that I really developed my ears. And
what did they say to you after that first gig, just out of curiosity?
Oh, I didn't get any backlash from them up until later.
Oh!
I left thinking that it was like, this was all right. And then it was not, in fact, all right.
Why wasn't it all right?
Oh, I got my friend David, who was the current admin for Gig Finder at the time, put out a very lengthy crucifixion post about me.
And this was about you specifically?
Tagged me in it specifically.
Oh! Okay, sorry.
Downside was like, I was like, man, I'm never playing again. Nashville's never gonna play in this town again. And the other side, most of the people were like, dude, this is everybody's first gig.
Was it just that first gig, like that got you on the shit list?
That was it. 99% of people were really cool. They were like, yeah, whatever, screw that. That's what happens to everybody when they move in town.
Okay.
For some reason, yours was just public, which was neither here nor there. And they were like, come in, this is where I'm playing, come sit in, come meet the band. And so on the upside is everybody knew who I was overnight. And I took a big step away and just learned a ton of songs.
Just went in the shed and
came back.
How long did you go back and lick your wounds before you took another gig?
It wasn't too long, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Probably, I would say a little less than a month before I started working with one person regularly who I knew their set list back to front. There was still a long period of time where I would get calls for filling gigs, like, I really need to take a look at your set list. I'm still pretty new.
Yeah.
I don't want to say yes and then only know half of it and stumble through the rest. And then I'll never forget, to tag along with that, there was this guy, Kevin Busby, he called me and played with him since. Great dude, plays downtown all the time. And he was like, hey man, I saw you play the other night. I've got these couple gigs, love to have you on. I said, I'd love to look at the set list first. Still learning. Take a look through it. You know what? I'm really not the best guy for this gig. There's too much I don't know. So I sent him another name for an older guy I knew. I was like, hey, here's so-and-so's number. He knows all this stuff. He'd be great. And he goes, oh no, we know him. He knows the songs, but he's an asshole to work with. He'd rather have you. And then that kind of brought me into this whole other aspect of being hireable and being nice to be with on stage sometimes goes further than actually just knowing the material. Being
an A person and a C+ player is much better than being an A player and like a C person.
Absolutely.
Because we've all been on those gigs and like, you know, someone you're like, this person may not get this, whatever, we're having
a good time.
That first gig, how long do you think it took for you to recover like your reputation? Like, do you think that damaged your reputation? Or like it gave you a name and everyone knew who you were?
Yeah, it did a little bit of both. So much of the community was just like, yeah, this is what happens to everybody when they move to town. Looking back on it, I don't regret it.
Okay.
Because it keeps me very grounded.
It feels like the world is ending in the moment or you're on that stage and you're like, oh God, I'm never gonna do this again. But then like after you spend some distance from it and you're able to get some perspective, you're like, wow, that ass kicking is what I needed.
Oh yeah, everybody has their come to Jesus gig. I just had it nice and early.
It doesn't mean anything. So when you see other people, new people in town, do you think about yourself and do you say, oh, I want to go talk to these people because nobody told me when I was new to town?
Absolutely. And
okay.
I do on a regular basis.
Okay.
Which I shouldn't say regular basis because I don't think I come into contact with those situations all that often, which is great.
Yeah.
But also, like, I saw this kid at Redneck Riviera probably about year and a half ago.
About a year ago. I think I know exactly what you're talking about.
And he just butchered this set. And I got to my gig early, so I was up there. My buddy Tin was behind the kit, just like
I know Tin. I talked to Tin about this.
Fuming. And the bass player comes up to me afterwards. He's like, "Hey man, like, how'd I do?" I was like, "To be honest with you, like, you really sucked." I'm like, but that's okay. Like, your number, I want like your email. I'm gonna send you like a bunch of stuff to learn.
Yeah.
I'm about to pat somebody on the back after they did a bad job.
You think you're being nice, but you're doing them a disservice.
You're doing them a massive disservice.
Yeah.
Like, you're not helping them at all.
Did they still play on Broadway or did they decide it wasn't for them?
I don't think he's a Nashville guy. From what I remember talking to the band leader who like, that's now one of my regular gigs. He was like a bass player in Florida who just happened to be up here for the weekend or something like that.
Okay, and so he thought he would, just dip his toes in the water and say, oh yeah, I went and played with these Nashville cats and I could hang, and then you're like, actually, it was.
Well, it's an entirely different animal. There's so many like A-list musicians out there who would show up and probably get sent home within the first 30 minutes.
Yeah.
It's a different skill set.
So that brings up a really good point because we have A-list musicians, people that we kind of aspire to be like, people that like we want to get on the stages they're on. But then the stages that we're on, it requires such a unique and very specific knowledge and skill set. Do you think that translates over to the bigger stages?
I think it does in certain degrees, but like a lot of the bigger stages, those gigs are so well rehearsed. You're playing your tracks, so you got ears on the whole time, and you know those same 10, 15 songs every night for months on end. Whereas down here, everything's very off the cuff. I'm sure you've been in those situations where everybody in the band subbed out, and so you show up and it's 5 people who have never met before.
Yeah, and you're like, you're on to, okay, what arrangement is this person going to play? I know the song's actually this way, but no one plays it this way. Are they going to do that? And
yeah. And your ability, like, to be able to watch people on stage, it's little things. Like, I'll I'll pay attention like a drummer's right hand and their swing if they were going to do that 2/4 bar in Chattahoochee, or like the solo section in am I drawing a blank for the song? Suds in the Bucket. It's supposed to be a full verse long.
Yeah.
A lot of vocalists don't do that. They'll cut it off 8 bars before. So I'll look over the singer, and if I see her take a breath in that last couple seconds, I know to just jump right back into it.
Yeah, and you're playing it the way the record's recorded, but everybody else is playing it the way they're feeling in that moment, and it's not where the record's at. You're wrong.
Right. It's like if everybody else is wrong, I'll be wrong with you.
Like going out on tour is like you are doing a play and it's scripted and you're following a script. And there's wiggle room within that script, but it's fairly set. When you're on Broadway though, it's like, let's make up a story. Let's see where this goes. Where does the audience want to go? And, oh, then who am I working with today? And it's like, what are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? And how can I be an asset? Can you get sucked into Broadway and make that your whole world and then not branch out? Or do you think Broadway leads to a lot of other opportunities outside of Broadway?
It leads to a lot of other opportunities. Whether or not you take them is I think that's, I don't want to say the gamble, but that's kind of roads that a lot of people come to.
It's a calculated risk.
It is. And like every opportunity I've ever had has been through somebody I've met downtown in one way or another.
Okay.
But I've seen a lot of people that
Think either or. There's nothing wrong with say I want to stay home, sleep in my bed, make money, see my kids, see my friends, see my family at nights. And I think there's nothing wrong with going out on the road and gambling. Like, I say gambling, but I think when you go out on the road, there's a much lower floor, much higher ceiling.
Absolutely.
Whereas Broadway, higher floor, but there's definitely a ceiling there. You aren't going to be the next big thing just from playing on Broadway.
Never will. Those days are over of like, they get a call for something really great. You know, they want to go on the road with an artist and they're, paying $250, $300 a night. And they're like, well, I can do that, or I could stay home and play a good double and walk away with $600 and sleep in my own bed. You would have people coming down and trying to find their bands downtown.
Yeah.
I like, whether we like it or not, this place is Disney World for adults.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, it's like Disney World for drunk assholes.
And like we're the circus monkeys, and I've got no problem with that because it pays my bills and I live very lucratively.
Yeah, people are coming to see us specifically. They're coming to see the monkeys.
Right.
And we are the monkeys, and we have to dance for them. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm saying that's the reality of the gig. Speaking of dance monkey, this is where I wanted to talk about some of the interesting ways the community interacts on Broadway. And I wanted to bring up one point and kind of transfer it into something else. Is that we're down on Broadway, we are the monkeys, and people are throwing the peanuts at us, right? Or our tips. Sometimes we assume that they automatically know, oh, it's $20 for a song. If you throw us $5, that's almost like an insult. Or if you just request a song and don't pay us anything, it's an insult. These people don't live down here regularly like we do. They're tourists. What are your feelings when people kind of belittle the audience or shame them kind of passive aggressively from the microphone? On one hand, you need to get your money. You need to get those tips. But on the other hand, it's never a good look to I think, be negative on stage. What are your feelings on that?
I think that there's tactful ways to go about it. I think belittling the audience is never a way to go about it.
Okay.
I've seen people just say, hey, we are taking requests for songs, take $20 per request, and they leave it at that. It's very gentle, but then I've seen other people who will like get a napkin with a song request in it, which is all well and fine.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody doesn't know that they're supposed to.
Yeah, they saw it in a movie.
I've seen singers just grab it and then get over the mic and say, oh, paper towels don't pay my bills, give us money. And that's just a little bit. Then you turn off the whole crowd. They're like, oh, we kind of want to go somewhere else.
Yeah, exactly. There's kind of ways about doing it and communicating with each other. Have you noticed that people talk that way with each other downtown, amongst each other? Like, what are your feelings on the politics of Nashville's Lower Broadway? You can be as specific or as general and broad as you want.
I think there's way too many politics downtown these days.
Okay.
I'll just be completely honest. Usually it's coming from the people who are not busy. The most active people on like social media when it comes to Broadway and everything like that, they're always like saying, oh, I need gigs. It's like, well, you took all this time off of social media and spent it practicing, maybe you wouldn't be looking for so many gigs.
Yeah, or maybe if you, I mean, sometimes it's a music thing, sometimes it's just like a personality thing. Like, because some people are challenging to work with, or some personalities don't mesh, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so how do you deal with when you're like working with a personality that is rubbing you the wrong way? Like, and maybe they wrong you in a way. Do you confront it right away, or do you think this, even if I'm right, that won't serve me? What do you, like, how do you approach that?
I usually won't even approach it at all. I'll just do my job on the gig and play nice, and I'm conveniently unavailable next time I get called.
And have you ever like been caught in the crossfire of any of those politics at all, or like caught between a rock and a hard place, or have you ever gotten some of that, been collateral damage or kickback from?
A little bit in a situation that I won't get into because I think it's a pretty sensitive topic.
Yeah.
I don't think has any place for a podcast or anything like that.
It has nuance, and it's not binary, and people want to say right or wrong and good or bad.
Right. I mean, there was one occasion a couple of years ago that there was a frontman who was wickedly drunk on stage. The guitar player and drummer that were both on the gig were brand new to town. Really, really great players. He also ran over on our set. The next band was sitting there waiting to set up.
Yeah.
Now, I pulled him aside afterwards. I was like, look, dude, you have two kids on stage who are like, you're supposed to be an example for them. And then we have another band who is waiting to set up and looking pretty irritated. It's like, at this point, you're kind of screwing with everybody in the room. I feel in situations like that, it needs to be addressed.
Yeah, or like I know there have been situations where things have gotten physical on stage, which is, I mean, that's not common. I've maybe heard about that once, and you know, that's uncalled for, and it's like, okay, we can't have that here. But I've also noticed that like there's a lot of airing of grievances online.
Way too much of it.
What do you think about that? Like, how do you approach that?
Most ways, that I've seen it, it's really not constructive. A lot of it's just people talking and wanting validation. And then I hear a lot of people talk about, you know, they complain about the Tootsie circuit and everything and how low the pay is. I'm like, we all know it. But if you keep on taking those gigs, then you're part of the problem.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. I think that's a real common frustration amongst musicians on Broadway. And I think it's valid, where we see that certain honky-tonks, they're not paying musicians as much as they could or should, and they say they can't afford it, yet they're sponsoring a NASCAR. They actually have their own NASCAR with their name on it. They're raking in all this money. And there's a lot of musicians who come to town and are working and barely making and have to move back home. And like I was saying about like people getting on the mic and confronting audience members over tips, like I get the financial frustration, but it's also like sometimes you just like, well, I don't have any gigs, I need money. And then also it's like, we didn't devise the system, and we know that we are very expendable. If you don't take a gig, there's always going to be somebody else that will take it.
Always.
You feel like you're trapped and like you just played 4 hours and you're walking away with $75. I think a lot of people, they feel that frustration and they have no outlet for it. And so they take it out on like patrons, or they take it out on other musicians instead of up the chain, because everybody up the chain has the power. And if we push back on them, it's like, well, we just won't hire you. We'll get somebody else that does the work. I get what you're saying. Maybe you and I can like agree on is like, if you have a grievance, what's your solution?
Right. I never just want to complain. It's like, what's the solution, like the long-term fix to whatever is going on?
So what was your long-term fix in terms of money, in terms of how did you get to a place financially where you could make enough money to support yourself playing music?
I got really lucky. I say this because, like I said, I just lost my place, had just recently got divorced. It was just me with like no expenses. Whereas somebody who maybe has a family, or they're even just married or living with somebody, it's a bigger gamble to take. Say, okay, well, I want to go try and play music for a living because you have other people relying on you.
Yeah.
I had nobody relying on me, so I was pretty well off in that department.
And yeah, but you also worked your ass off. One time I was like, Logan, maybe just don't take a quad. Maybe you'll feel better the next day. You're like, yeah, that's right. I guess so. And then like next day you're like playing a quad.
Most I ever did in a week was 23.
Oh, boy.
And I felt like I got hit by a truck.
Yeah, for those who don't know, these are 4-hour shifts where you take no breaks from playing. So you literally were on stage playing 92 hours. That's not including the time getting to the gig, setting up, breaking down, driving. Oh man.
It was a long week.
Yeah, that's my insides hurt just thinking about that. I want to make this video about talking to community members and what can we do to help other community members, like instead of just like talking about ourselves. Tyson Leslie called me about a couple, maybe let's say like 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we had a good chat. So I was recently involved in somewhat of a controversy, and I didn't even really know about it. Like I woke up and I knew about it. I made a comment and I just went about my day. And then like I went and worked out and my phone had blown up. Like so many people calling to check in on me, making sure.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Making sure I hadn't killed myself. They're like, "Are you okay, man?" Like, "Oh God, it's really bad. Don't worry about the haters." I'm like, "Wait, what?" And Tyson reached out to me. Now, Tyson is a busy dude. He runs so many gigs. He's the hardest guy to pin down in Nashville. And he's a great dude. He's a great community member. He's always wanting to help people out. I was like, man, if Tyson called me, I should probably call him. And he and I chatted about this. He mentioned you. He was like, well, Logan kind of had some fuck ups when he was, came to town, and he just didn't say anything about it. And then like he let it settle. And then like a couple weeks later, he made a post and then he let his actions speak for himself. How did that inform you in terms of the politics and what to say and what not to say on Broadway?
I'm trying to think how to word this. I think just being diplomatic and friendly goes a long way, and then acknowledging when you made a mistake. People don't want to hear excuses. They don't want to hear you defend yourself. They just want to hear you Roger up, say, "Yep, my bad."
Yeah.
And move forward.
So do you think that usually works when people say, "Hey, my bad," and they just move forward? Do people forget about that, or do you think people hang on to that?
I think it depends on the situation. It also depends on the people. Some people, I think that most people in this town are really quick to give second chances and try somebody out again, especially when you don't know them personally. Like, I'm not about to hang on to some shit like that.
I think last year we were both on a gig together and I asked you about something that was kind of one of the latest dramatic dust-ups on Facebook. People airing their dirty laundry. And I was like, whoa, what's going on? And I asked you and you're like, yeah, it's kind of, yeah, I don't know. It's unfortunate. And you just like said it like that. And even like then I was like, oh, okay, I get it. And like looking back now, I even get it more because like what do we have to gain by piling on somebody or like participating in the gossip mill? Because it's just like kind of it just...
What good is it doing?
So with my latest dust up, and again, I don't want to make this about me, but using myself as an example, when I was doing something that from my vantage point, I was like, okay, this is helpful to people. And this could be useful in this way. And other people didn't agree with me. And that's okay. Like, I'm totally fine with that. I'm all about like, we're all in this place together and let's have a discussion. But then I quickly realized, oh, there's so many people that, like the loudest people are usually the people that don't want to have a conversation. They want to have an argument and they want to be right.
Yeah.
It's very much like politics where everything is like you're either on this side or this side. And people are more interested in trying to win an argument than, oh, let's find a middle ground and work together and go forward.
Nobody wants to have a conversation.
Yeah.
I think that understanding why somebody does something that they do, mm-hmm. even if I don't agree with it, if I can now just like understand like where your headspace was at,
yeah,
I think that goes a long way.
If you knew about my Ultimate Nashville chart collection, it's basically charts I gathered from about 2 years on Broadway. I wrote some of them out. Some of them I got from other people. It's just all these, like, I connected everything in this silo, and then I compressed it all into, like, a little package that you could literally airdrop. And then I was, like, putting out my next version, which was, like, meta-tagged with the key, the BPM, the artist, the genre, and also it had a Spotify link all in it. So you just, like, I got tired of being on gigs and people like, I don't have that chart. If I could just like give somebody something right in that moment, they have all the charts, they have the Spotify list, super effective. And I was like, you know what? You can get this for free online, anywhere you want. But like, this is just a way of putting all the busy work, getting everything alphabetized, getting everything like in keys and tempos, and just having this massive collection. And then also there's people outside of Nashville who play this, who like are curious about that. So I was like, you know what, instead of like everybody jumping through all these hoops, let me put this here.
Yeah, you made a streamlined version of it.
Yeah, I was basically making like a streamlined version of Ultimate Guitar, like that people use and pay for on stage. Some people thought that I was stealing other people's work and like, okay, like, well, let's talk about that. And I'm like, well, they're not your songs, but I know that you did the time and work to chart these out. And I was trying to be very transparent about that. And as soon as like I saw these messages, I said, okay, I hopped in, I said, mea culpa, here's what I was thinking about doing. And I know it wasn't received this way. How can I make this right? I can make amends, I can give this out for free, I can do a workshop on this stuff. Tell me what you guys would like to make it right. And like within 5 minutes, I just like saw a bunch of shut the fuck up. And I'm like, okay.
Right, so it's like, okay, now, like you're trying to make things right, but they don't want to hear it.
They don't want you to make things right. They just want to yell at somebody. And they're entitled to do that. I've always felt like a real community here in Nashville, even on Broadway. It kind of bummed me out because I'm like, I really want to help people and I want to participate. But it's also like, it bummed me out, not so much for my own ego, but just like, man, some of these people just don't want you to do anything.
No.
Or they are just bitter, angry, mad people. It kind of reminded me about, do you know when somebody tipped you on Broadway, a tourist, via Venmo, and then they take back the tip like, you know, a week or so later? It's tacky, it's not cool. I don't like it when people post that person's name online, even though that person did the dirty deed, and then everyone contacts that person and piles on them. It's not a good look for us.
I'll disagree with that there. I've got no problem with anybody posting the person. Because I think what they're trying to do is like knowing that person's probably in town for the weekend. It's like, hey, if you see this person come into your gig and they try and tip you, don't even bother with them.
Okay.
I don't agree with people reaching out to them and just kind of like,
it's like a soft doxing, and then everyone harasses these people.
yeah, don't harass them. It's like the purpose of that is like, okay, if you see them coming into the gig, don't give them the time of day.
Yeah, or just say, hey, this is how, maybe these people didn't know, and this is like how we do it here. And nobody's in the wrong when that happens.
No.
But I think everyone's so quick and like ready to like fight or like jump down someone's throat. In certain circles, I think.
A lot of people just get off on it, and I don't understand it. Like, it's people just want to be bullies on the internet because they think it's fun, and I think it's childish.
I thought a lot about that. I remember maybe it was like 2 or 3 years ago, there was the original Gig Finder page. And what got that shut down was there was one weekend where everyone was piling on this one dude. And this dude didn't really do anything like immoral, unethical. He was just kind of like, he did things a little bit, he's like, hey, I need a drummer for Tuesday, who's available?
I know exactly who you're talking about.
Yeah, and people are like, they think that's annoying, and it can be like when you're using it as a classified page, but like, it was like open season on this dude. And then, you know what? I read that, and I was kind of laughing along, and I was like, I was entertained by it. And now looking back on it, I'm like, that really wasn't helpful to anybody.
Well, the longer story of that is the first guy to chime in was Lee Kelly.
Yeah.
Who is Hank Williams Jr.'s drummer.
Yeah.
And all he said was like, hey man, just for future reference, you'll probably have better luck finding players if you give the location, time, pay details. He's like, that way your inbox isn't getting blown up with 50 messages of people who may or may not be able to do it. You only get ones who can. And he basically just told him to fuck off, not knowing who he was talking to. And the rest of the community was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I don't know if he even said anything. Did he say anything to him? I don't think he did. Maybe my memory is wrong. I don't know. I just remember that was like, and then it was just like a swarm. And like looking back, it was entertaining. It was like, that was like my night of TV. But now it's like, I think it turned from being constructive to just everyone bullying this guy.
Yeah, it was.
And I don't think I've heard from him since.
I haven't. Years ago, he had 144 musicians in a text group chat.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing. It was like, need players for a show in December in Florida. And we'd be like, what day in Florida? What city? Like, and it was just like vagueness. Like every day, we're like, just remove?
I played a couple gigs with him, and I was in those chats, and I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna remove myself from this. I guess like thinking about all these things, it just made me think maybe like the loudest people aren't the majority. They're just the middle.
They're just loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk ill about anybody. It does us no good if we just like shit on somebody else.
And it doesn't make you look good either. Like, nobody wants to be around that kind of energy.
No.
I don't want to play a gig where people are just talking shit the whole time.
Part of me is just like, well, this is my home and I live here. Maybe we can do better. Then part of me is just like, you know what? I don't want to engage with these people. After my incident, I thought about it for like one night. Literally one night. I was like, let me assess my values. Did I feel like I was doing anything that was disingenuous, like I was taking advantage of anybody? No, I thought I had a good idea. Maybe I didn't do the best execution. I don't want to like dismiss any of like things I could have done better just because people were mean and they said bad words. But it's like I also like, are these people, do they invest in the community? Do they want to make things better for everybody? Or do they just want to make somebody feel like shit? I found that me trying to participate in any conversations there was not going to do anything. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, you know what? Like, I just don't need to participate in this because it's not doing anybody anything. It's made me like really step back and reassess, how do we talk to each other online, and then how do we talk to each other in real life, and like, really, what are we doing? How do you avoid, it seems like you kind of steer clear of the nastiness.
I just keep to myself.
Okay.
For the most part. Well, also, I personally enjoy being happy. Like, I've I mean, what a fucking concept.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, I've caught myself on bad days where I'm just like, oh, I don't want to go downtown today. I'm tired.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna make any money. But then I'll take a step back. I'm like, dude, I'm playing music for a living.
Yeah.
I'm making good money doing it. I don't like, as much as I hate playing Tennessee whiskey a million times a week, there's always some old couple in the crowd who's having a moment and they're it's like, you know what, enjoy that. Like, you're giving that to somebody.
Yeah, like it is really truly an honor and a privilege. Somebody spending their free time and their free money, and you are there to like create memories for them.
Exactly.
And like, are you thinking about how much you hate the song, or you're like, oh, I get to give these people a memory? You can focus on like, there's tough things about playing in Nashville. There's tough things about Broadway, but there's also great things about it. Do you find yourself gravitating towards more positive people, or do you just find yourself that they gravitate towards you? How do you approach that?
I definitely gravitate towards more positive people, and unfortunately, I think that the vast majority of people downtown are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do too.
There's very few bad eggs.
Yeah, the bad eggs down there are usually the loudest ones.
They're the loudest, and they're not here long.
I remember you mentioned something to me that I really felt it in the moment. I was just like, I was bummed out. You made this emergency pack, and you posted online. Anybody downtown? I got capos, I got a 1/4 inch, I got tuners, I got sticks, drum keys.
It's like $300 worth of stuff.
Yeah,
yep.
And if you need something in emergency, just go and get it. Just put money in the,
I didn't even ask for that. I just put my number on the top, and I said, text me what you took. That way I can refill the box.
Yeah, and what happened with
Somebody stole the whole thing.
And it's
This is why we can't have nice things.
Man, I really appreciate you doing that. And I'm sorry that happened. With what you've learned on Broadway, how is that applying to your gigs outside of Broadway? Like both either musically, personally, professionally?
I mean, they're completely different animals for sure. Mm-hmm. I would say that like Broadway more than anything is a tool. Nowhere else in the country are you going to get that much stage time in the course of, let's just say, a year.
Yeah, my first year on Broadway was literally like, it was like a year of college. It was, you're deep into it, and it was really, I learned a lot.
I mean, you look at most, like the rest of the country, people who are like playing cover bands or bar gigs, they're playing, maybe 2 to 3 hour sets on the weekends.
Yeah, and they're like 45-minute set, you get a break.
You get a break.
Yeah.
In comparison, a year's worth of time in Nashville on stage is like a decade of practice time.
Yeah, it is super concentrated, super sped up. It is like you're in this tsunami of information and learning, and like, how can I can't hear anything and I still need to play this song. I can't hear anything. Never heard the song and I still need to play it. What am I gonna do? Like those things you can't replace them. The experience you've gotten here, has it translated to like playing on bigger stages?
It has, mainly with just like that nonverbal communication thing, especially with, there was a couple shows this last tour that the track rig went out. So it's just like, okay, cool, everybody make sure we're on the same page, looking at each other, watching for cues.
If you give a piece of advice, one piece of advice to somebody coming to Nashville, give me one piece of like professional musical advice and then also one piece of personal advice that you would give to people or give to a younger version of yourself who are like new to town.
Find out where your strengths and weaknesses are musically for sure, and then like continue to put yourself in a slight bit of discomfort.
Okay.
I love gigs where like I'm not drowning.
You have to be like, oh.
I have to be alert.
Yeah.
And I have to watch. Because I think that gigs like that, you leave better. And then like personal advice, be a good hang. Keep your calendar straight. Put everything in a calendar.
Okay.
I sit down for at least a couple hours a week and just go through my calendar, emails, text messages, whatever, and bounce everything off of each other to make sure I'm not missing anything, because it's happened before. Yeah, just stay organized. I mean, the learning never stops. It's never ever going to stop. When I got here, it was the same 150, 200 songs everywhere you went. Now it's a complete free-for-all.
Yeah, and now it's like, it's not just one style. It is like, I can play like an old, like, you know, Hank Williams, Lefty Frizzell tune. The next thing I know, I'm like playing like Creed and Fall Out Boy. And I had to play War Pigs the other day, and I've heard it on the radio. I'm just like, oh man, I probably should learn this arrangement. And
that's another thing too, is especially as side musicians, learn how to be stylistically diverse and efficient in them. I don't play the same way or with the same tones on my Friday, Saturday gig at Bon Jovi's as I do at like my Legends gig.
oh yeah, it's totally different. It's like I'm working in an Italian restaurant today, tomorrow I'm working in a Mexican restaurant. Sometimes those things don't exactly blend.
Well, it's like I've had friends who like they got fired from gigs and they're like, oh, well, I'm just, you know, I'm a rock drummer. That's how I play.
No.
It's like, do you think I like playing Morgan Wallen tunes? I don't.
No,
But
yeah.
I learned them like the record because it pays my bills.
Who's ever paying me money on the gig, they call the shots.
Yeah, it's like I'm not a rock bass player or a jazz bass player or whatever. It's like I'm a musician first. All those other things are secondary.
So do you have anything to promote? Where can people find you? Do you do the socials, or are you just kind of more like, I'm an in-person guy? What's your...
I do social media. I'm not really great at it anymore.
Okay.
I mean, I definitely always post stuff about like where I'm playing, like highlights from shows and whatnot. It's just Logan Hatcher bass on everything.
Yeah, you know what? Like, now that I come to think about it, I like your online presence because from what I recall, there's not a lot of belly aching. There's not a lot of patting yourself on the back or airing of, it's just like, I'm playing here. Here's this great meal I cooked.
My social media is reserved for the gigs I play, food and memes, and that's it. My personal life does not go on the internet. And that's another thing, is just like, for somebody new to town, make your presence known. And I'm not saying that just on social media. I'm saying going out and meeting people.
Oh, yeah. Boots on the ground is like so important.
I've had so many guys who are older than me and better, and they're like, hey man, like I'm really hurting for gigs. Like, I don't understand how you have so many right now. It's like, well, it's a revolving door. It's like there's so many people in this town who just don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
They're not calling you because they don't think you're any good. It's just they
don't
have your phone number.
You may have been here for years, but like everybody's like coming in and going out, coming in. It's like you constantly have to reintroduce yourself because there's always new people.
Always.
And that's the name of the game.
It's like if you get here and you've been here a couple weeks and maybe you have your first gig at, let's say it's one of those, crappy HTC second gigs in the morning. It's like, okay, you pack up your gear and then you go hang out for a couple hours afterwards and you go meet more people.
Yeah, and if you don't like get another gig, just like go and like listen, take notes.
I still go listen. I'll just go sit in Roberts and just get taken to school.
Yeah, those dudes, they're like, all right, here's Hot Apple Butterscotch Blues from 1917. You're like, I've never heard that song. And someone's like,
they're cooking.
Yeah, they're like, you never heard this? And it's like, whoa, yeah. There's so many great musicians down here. And also there are so many not great musicians down here. And that's another conversation, but like, that's what happens when you have so many musicians.
Yeah. And there's people who are really bad musicians, but really great performers. And I'll tell you what, like some of the best performers I know make great money.
Yeah.
There's other people who are like so good at their craft and they're no fun to watch.
What's your version of success? Do you want to like play a gig where I've walked away from gigs where I've made $75 and I've felt so fulfilled and happy, and I've walked away from gigs that I've made $500. I'm like, God, that was terrible. And they're not mutually exclusive. It's like it's just realizing, okay, some days they're gonna have good days, some days they're gonna be bad days, some days they're gonna be different. But that's the music business, right? There's so many different people, so many different styles. And I guess the one thing I've learned is that it's not about me. Nobody cares.
And at the end of the day, it's still work.
Yeah.
It's like we don't get to play songs we want to play all the time to rooms that we want to play. Like, we're still showing up to do a job.
Yeah.
And getting to have fun is fantastic.
Yeah.
But first and foremost, it's what we do to pay our bills.
You bring up a really good point, and it's a job, and I don't mean it as a job like it's fun, I love my job, but also a job is not about you, it's about serving other people. And I think that sometimes we miss that, and really being a musician, I think it's being of service to your fellow human, and we forget about that. It's not about like, hey, look at how talented and great I am. It's, I'm going to give you some joy. I'm going to give you something that you can't buy in the store. I'm going to play you a tune. That's a serious honor.
No, it is. Like, we're very privileged and lucky to be able to do what we do.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, there are tunes that are like, I hate all the small things. I hate it. Oh! Pardon my French. But if it makes people happy, cool. Let's do it. I would rather make other people happy and do some work to make other people happy than like, you know, play some like far out Mahavishnu orchestra tune and like be happy and everyone be like, what is this noise?
I'll play that stuff at home.
Yeah.
Or I'll put like a side project together and go play like a small bar gig at
Yeah,
like Inglewood Lounge or something like that.
Yeah, where like only the girlfriends of the band or the boyfriends show up.
Well, I mean, it makes sense there. It's like there's also like a fine line between playing songs that engage with the crowd and playing songs that fulfill yourself.
Yeah.
I had to quit one gig recently. It was a lot of work, but it was just all B-side slow stuff that nobody wanted to hear. And so it was just like, people would come in, it's like, oh, no, we're trying to party on a Friday night.
Yeah.
And then turn around and leave. It's like,
Yeah.
if you don't know how to engage with the crowd and all you're doing is playing songs that you want to hear, you're doing the whole band a disservice.
Yeah, so many words of wisdom here, and I think, yeah, you could start your own podcast. I know you've been on several, but I mean, you have a lot of wisdom to offer, and I think
Appreciate that.
I appreciate you being a member of the community where you're like actually like, I want to invest in the community, and I'm just going to, when all the kerfuffle starts, I'll just kind of hang out and chill out. Yeah, because I think a lot of this stuff blows over, or like, sometimes it can be like high school, and you're like, well, you go back to like your high school and the people who are still there hanging out and doing their old thing, and it's like life goes on. Like,
Well, in a lot of ways it is. Think about how many people who moved here right out of high school or college.
yeah.
Like, they haven't lived in the real. I'm kind of glad I got a late start on it.
Yeah,
I had to go be an adult for a little while first.
And there's nothing wrong with staying down on Broadway. There's nothing wrong with saying like, this is what I do. I think, and I want to be clear about that, because there are some musicians who look down on people who play on Broadway, and then there's some Broadway musicians who look down on people who don't play on Broadway. And I think a lot of that is just people's insecurity.
100%.
And I mean, us as musicians, we're insecure. I mean, I think one of the reasons that a lot of us get on stage is like, we want to be like, oh, this will make me special. This will make me valid to somebody. I know that's kind of where I came from. And I know like addressing my insecurity has been like a huge thing for my musical career. And if I would address that sooner. Yeah, so if I have one piece of advice for you at home, if you're watching, don't be afraid to address your insecurity, talk to a therapist. All right, cool. So this is Logan Hatcher. You can follow him, Logan Hatcher Bass, on Instagram, on Facebook, TikTok, Tinder, Bumble. Any other places I'm missing?
Nope.
Okay.
I actually don't even do the TikTok thing.
Okay. Do you do YouTube?
Nope.
Okay.
I need to, but
I mean, it's just like there's so many, like not everything needs to be for everybody, right? There's so many things coming out. Like it's okay to be like, you know what? I'll hang out in this one.
Yeah.
So Logan Hatcher Bass, Facebook, Instagram. And there was a lot of wisdom in there from one of the best guys I know. Who else would put $300 worth of emergency gear in a secret place for musicians and expect nothing in return? Likewise, Tyson was telling me about a time when he didn't even know Logan, and Logan came over and moved this crazy big awkward couch with Tyson for free, expecting nothing in return. And really, that's the kind of guy Logan is. He just wants to help other people out. Before we wrap, I want to share a quick personal story about Logan. And I'm not sure if he even remembers this happening, but this meant a lot to me. And it was almost exactly a year ago. Logan and I were on the same show. And afterwards, we were hanging out at after hours. There's a bunch of us musicians there. We're at the bar next to the venue. And we're just catching up. And Logan looked at me and he earnestly asked, he said, "Hey man, are you doing okay?" And he meant it in a real way. And I thought for a second and I looked and I said, "No, I'm not." And I think I even started maybe getting a little bit glassy-eyed. And he said, "Let's go talk in the corner." And he and I just talked for a few minutes. And that made things better for me. Just knowing that someone cared, knowing that someone had gone through some other challenges in their life. And Logan's checked on me a few times since then. And we shoot messages back and forth every now and again. And just that one day when I was in a rough spot, he could tell. And he didn't offer to fix it. He didn't give me any advice. He just wanted to listen and he cared. And he may forget an innocuous moment like that, but it meant the world to me. And it made me feel not quite so alone and not quite so hopeless. So Logan, I thank you for that, man. Just meant a lot as a friend. And if you've got a story about Logan or Tyson or any other musician that kind of helped you out, went above and beyond in their call of duty to have your back, drop it in the comments. Let's show some appreciation to the people who make Nashville the wonderful place that it is. And speaking of that, Nashville really is full of great people and great musicians. I spent some time in this series talking about the challenges I faced. Some folks think I brought them upon myself. Some think it was unfair. Some are in the middle. And all of that is fine. The intention here was never for an argument. It was to have a conversation, to share my experience, and to hear from others so that we can all learn from it. For example, I'm actually reshooting this intro and outro to highlight something incredibly important. And it's this: context matters. I use a service called Opus Clip to take long-form content and automatically chop it up into smaller, more digestible pieces for platforms like TikTok, YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels. And today, Opus Clip shot out the top-rated short that I should post, and it was a quote about monkeys dancing for tips. I knew exactly what Logan meant in that moment, but out of context, I can now see how it could be misinterpreted. And I asked Logan himself and he wasn't bothered by it. But it reminded me that as my audience grows, I have to be a lot more intentional about my messaging. Someone might only see a few seconds and take it the wrong way, and that would be on me. But I also value learning, growing, and exchanging ideas even when it's uncomfortable and heads clash a bit. But the bottom line is, Nashville and the lower Broadway scene are great places. Sometimes we disagree, but we're really all in the same boat. If you see things differently, or you have another perspective, I'd love to hear from you if you intend on having a real conversation, exchanging ideas, and not just trying to argue. And with that in mind, I'm putting this chapter of the chart saga behind me. I'm done talking about it publicly, and I'm moving forward. In the coming weeks, I've got great videos about licensing your song, recording original music, publishing, money, and all the other things that us musicians here in Nashville and across the country and the globe think about. So I sincerely thank you for coming along for this part of the journey. I thank people like Logan and Tyson who stuck out their neck for me and came on and talked honestly and talked politely and respectfully, and who frankly are just, like I said before, they're great people. And I truly am honored to share the same space with them and share the same community with them. So Logan and Tyson, I'm humbled by you. Also like to thank my buddy Mojo. I usually don't call him Mojo, but that's his brand. Mojo is a bassist in St. Louis who's been invaluable to me throughout this whole YouTube experience. He's often worked for free for me. He's volunteered for tasks. He's worked for cheap. But most importantly, he's been a great friend to me. He's like the goofy brother that I never wanted, but I'm honored to have. So if you could do me a favor and follow Mojo, there's his YouTube channel right there. And I'll see you on the next video. And as always, please be kind to yourself, be kind to your neighbor. Thanks for watching.